Hello, hello. Welcome back to Loki's Librarian. If you are new here, welcome. I am your librarian, Katrina, and Sundays I do this thing called Books and Booze, where I review a book and mix up a cocktail. This month we are looking at women's history, making this week's book Infidel by Ayaan Hirsi Ali. Whoops. Haven't had a drop to drink, and I'm already clumsy as hell today. The accompanying cocktail is an infidel. Whoa, hey, I was like, wait, I'm repeating myself. No, I'm not repeating myself. That is actually the cocktail. It is an infidel. It is 3/4 ounces each of gin, dry vermouth, mint syrup, and lime juice. Mint leaf to garnish. Pretty easy. Let's do this. The foreword of this book points out that the book is really two books in one, which is fair. The first part is about Hirsi Ali's childhood, what shaped her and led her to part two, her freedom. Part two is about the choices she made as an adult that set her on her current path and set her free. 3/4 ounces each. Eyeball the 3/4 ounces. Trying to kill some of the little bottles here. The introduction is the ending. So it's very, very Harry Potter. I open at the close, right? She mentions, she starts, I think, the way she did with her prologue or introduction, to honor her friend, Theo van Gogh, who was a Dutch filmmaker who made Submission Part 1 with Hirsi Ali, which led to his own assassination at the hands of Muslim extremists in November of 2004, approximately 2 months after the film was released. I'm eyeballing it. I gotta kind of pay attention here. Give me a moment. Now, for the record, that film, and I will link it here because I found it. It's fairly easy to find. It is on YouTube. You can watch it. I'll link it so you can find it. It's about 10 minutes long, maybe 10 and a half minutes long, and it's powerful to watch. It sends a message. It is in English, or at least the version I found of it is in English with, I'm assuming, Dutch subtitles, so you can watch it there. It is only 10 minutes. It's worth the watch. She circles back to Theo's assassination at the end of the book because this event forced her into hiding for several months and would ultimately contribute to her decision to leave Dutch politics and relocate to America. All of that is in the future. That's the end segment. That's the end of this segment of her life. To get there, we have to go back to the beginning of Ayaan Hirsi Ali's life. So she starts her book literally by asking, who are you? Those are the first words on the page. Who are you? I am Ayaan, daughter of Hirsi, son of Magan. That is how the book starts. And for the first 22-ish years of her life, typo here, her name was Ayaan Hirsi Magan. I'm probably mispronouncing that, and I apologize. Mint syrup. And in the way of all Somali people, she was raised knowing every member of her tribal lineage going all the way back like 800 years. All right. Ali was the name of, I think it was her great-grandfather, and she would adopt that name later when she landed in Holland. Let me shake this up. Now, Ayaan Hirsi Magan was born November 13, 1969 in Mogadishu, Somalia. To Hirsi Magan, Issi, and his second wife, Asha. All right. So there's the basic family. She was the second born. The couple had a son, Mahad, for older, and then had another daughter, Hawaya, who was, of course, Ayaan Hirsi Ali's younger sister. Hirsi Magan was in prison shortly after Ayaan's younger sister was born, and Ayaan didn't really remember him for a lot of that. So the three children with their mother and grandmother stayed in Mogadishu so that Asha could visit her husband in prison. And in the way of, well, in true Islamic fashion, Mahad was the golden child, firstborn son, oldest child, the absolute golden child. He was spoiled by her grandmother and mother. And Ayaan basically says that he was a bully all her life. There were very few moments of accord between those two siblings. She was much closer with her younger sister. Her grandmother thought Ayaan was a stupid child, and that self-image would kind of be reinforced throughout her childhood. She believed she was never very smart or very clever because her mother and grandmother told her she was a stupid girl. All right, that reinforces, right? Oh, that's delightful. That is delightful. Good call. So Somalia was really hard for Asha with her husband in prison because he was a political prisoner. He's in Sayed Barre's communist government. He attended Columbia University in New York. He believed democracy was the way forward for Somalia, not communism, which is, of course, what Sayed Barre was pushing. Now, one day when Mahad was 6, Ayaan was 5, and Hawaya was 4, while their mother was out. I think she was trying to see their father in prison. Their grandmother had a man come to the house and circumcise all the children. Mahad was the first. He was the oldest as the boy. typical circumcision, the West is at least familiar with this process. It's removal of the foreskin, right? Women, at least in the West, are not routinely circumcised outside of religious extremists. It is more commonly known in the West as female genital mutilation. And in Ayaan and Hawaya's case, it was brutal. I mean, it's brutal regardless. I mean, I don't mean to say that it's not a brutal technique. It would be awful even if they did it when they were, infants, like we usually do with boys in the West here, right? Female circumcision, female genital mutilation can range from a very small removal of just the tip of the clitoris, which, again, no walk in the park, to the removal of the labia and clitoris, followed by stitching them up almost entirely, leaving just a tiny hole of urine for urine to trickle out of. And that's more or less what happened for Ayaan and Hawaya. So they had everything removed and were stitched up and had to deal with that at the ages of 5 and 4. Now that is just one of, and arguably the biggest horror that fell upon Ayaan during her childhood. And to her mother's credit, Asha was pissed when she got home and found out the child had been cut without her children, all 3 of them, not just the 2 girls, but the boy also, had been cut without her knowledge or her consent. Hirsi Madigan, for the record, was also not a fan of cutting. He also disapproved. He had been educated in the West, so fair enough, right? Eventually, Hirsi would escape prison and the family would move with him to Saudi Arabia, then to Ethiopia, Kenya. I feel like there was another place in there somewhere. Ayaan would learn Arabic and Swahili for sure. The most widely spoken language in Ethiopia is Amharic. I don't remember if she mentioned learning that while she was in Ethiopia. I'm not sure if they were long enough in Ethiopia because her mother hated it. Her mother far preferred Saudi Arabia, considered it the most sophisticated and most Islamic of countries. That was where Islam was born, was the Arabian Peninsula. And she just thought that was where they should be. It was the heart of everything. And when they left Riyadh, she was deeply unhappy that they were relocating to Ethiopia. Ethiopia was, I'm not sure if it still is, but at least it was a Christian nation. And she considered Ethiopians to be godless heathens because they weren't Muslim. Figures. It was when the family moved to Kenya that Asha and Hirsi's marriage would start to fall apart, and he would eventually leave the family there, penniless and stranded, as Asha did not believe she should be working outside the home. She was a wife and a mother. So the family fell back on the clan ties that traced back 800 years, communicating with the clan leaders that were relocated to Kenya for assistance and housing as needed. And Ayaan became expected to do all of the housework. She was the eldest daughter. It was her job to do all the housework. Hawaya just flat refused to assist, to participate. She's like, nope, I'm not doing this. I'm out. And Ayaan was beaten a lot. She describes being horribly beaten by her mother and her grandmother, frequently for various household infractions. Beatings only stopped when a religious scholar, and I'm putting that in air quotes because he was not an educated man beyond a very basic rudimentary understanding of the Quran and the Hadith, came by. And Ayaan and Hawaya refused to participate in his lessons one day because he talked in circles. What he said didn't make sense. He couldn't explain beyond saying, Muhammad says so. He couldn't explain why women were considered inferior, why, they had to dress super modestly, but men could do whatever they want. And so Ayaan and Hawaya refused to participate one day. They locked themselves in a room until eventually everybody left. Now, when everybody else left, Hawaya, boom, she peaced out. She left the house entirely. Ayaan decided that she might mitigate the beating she was sure to get if she would at least do the housework so that it was done when her mother got home, right? Well, as she's getting started, she realized that the front gate had been left unlocked. So she goes down to close the gate, and boom, there's the Ma'alim. I'm sure I mispronounced Ma'alim, the religious scholar, right? He dragged her into the house and beat her so badly he fractured her skull. She barely survived. She did have to go to the hospital. Her mother did take her to the hospital. And at that point, her mother stopped beating her. It's like, okay, my kid almost died. Maybe I should stop hitting her. She was Muslim. Asha was, Ayaan was, the whole family was. And Asha wanted her children to learn to be educated in Islam. So Ayaan went to Muslim school and would eventually join a branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. Yeah. In Kenya, she met her first love, a friend of her brother's, Kennedy. This was, well, basically a childhood flirtation. In the West, it would be a harmless childhood flirtation. In Kenya, among her heavily religious and heavily segregated clan life, she's actually a bit lucky that her faith in Allah had her repelled by Kennedy when he announced he was an atheist. Like one day they're they're talking, they're chatting, and he's like, "No, I'm an atheist," and that turned her off of him because Allah is not going to have any truck with atheists, right? After this point in her life, Ayaan and Hawaii decided to return to Mogadishu in Somalia, where they would live with their father's first wife. This was completely normal, expected among the clans in Somalia. Something to be said for the clan system. You always have somewhere to go. There's always somebody. I mean, it may not be the most pleasant and peaceful of lives, but there's always somewhere you can go and somebody who will take you in. While there, Ayaan would become even more embroiled in Islam, and while her brother initially made a match for her with an Abdullahi, Ayaan would fall in love with Abdullahi's brother, a rather serious and up-and-coming Ma'alim, Imam, I'm not even sure what the term is, Abshir. And they were very much in love, but their relationship would unravel under the hypocrisy of Islam. After one very impassioned sermon that he gave about the dangers of sin and temptation or something like that, Abshir attempted to kiss Ayaan, and basically all the feeling she had for him died in her in that very second. Now, she's very clear that she does not actually blame Abshir for this, all right? She's very, that's what I'm looking for, fair and honest in her evaluations of her past relationships, of what made what tick, right? Like, she doesn't blame her mom for the beatings or anything like that. And not in a, that's who made me the woman I am today, but in the way that she has compassion for her mother and knows that her mother's life did not turn out the way that Asha had thought it would. It wasn't the life she wanted for herself. And she took her frustrations out on her daughters. And Ayaan acknowledges that and forgives it, which is a lot more than a lot of people these days would do. People, at least the very childish upbringing we've been giving the kids in the West is, hold a grudge forever. There's no room for forgiveness. We try telling them forgiveness isn't for the person who wronged you, it's for you, so you can know peace, and they will have absolutely nothing to do with that. They'd rather hold that grudge tight to their chests. Ayaan does not. She honestly evaluates all of her past relationships and says, this is where I'm at with this person retrospectively. I understand what happened. I forgive them for their part. I forgive me for my part in it too, which is big. I absolutely love reading her. She's an amazing author. So anyway, she doesn't blame Abshir. She says he was caught in the same hypocritical trap that she was. But yeah, her feeling for him died. Now, through all of this, she's reading, and not just the Quran and the Hadith and the approved school curriculum, right? She's reading literature. She's fluent in at least 4 languages. She's got Somali, Swahili, Arabic, and English. So she's reading Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and she's reading Harlequin romance novels. And she's bothered by the fact that she has no say in her own life. I mean, yeah, but 1990s Somalia is not exactly the safest place to take a stand on this matter. She tried to, sort of. She began hanging out with her Aunt Khadija, who was her mother's older half-sister. I think Khadija was like 1 or 2 years younger than her grandmother, technically. Khadija would influence Ayaan in several ways. Khadija had supported Siad Barre and compared the Muslim Brotherhood to a cancer, so she was not wrong there. I mean, she was wrong about Siad Barre. I mean, communism, we've seen the results of that. It's nothing good, right? But it was at Khadija's house that she would meet Mahmoud, Ayaan's cousin. They would fall into mad lust and love and elope, sort of. Eloping in Somalia is not like eloping in America, where you just, go to the court, you go to City Hall and you get a marriage license, and then you run to Vegas and get married by Elvis, right? That's eloping in America. Eloping in Somalia involves the guardian speaking on Ayaan's behalf, and because she had made the match herself, that guardian could not be her brother or her father, because they didn't approve the match. So in their case, they found another cousin, Ali Wersingeli, who stood as Ayaan's guardian, and Ayaan and Mahmoud were married. Sort of. Again, a lot with the sort ofs, right? They spent one night together before he left for a job opportunity in Russia, and then they never had contact again. Never saw each other, never called, no letters. One night. He probably divorced her as soon as he left the hotel. Like, not even joking. I'm assuming this is true, but I haven't actually read it. But, Muslim men can divorce by just saying, I divorced thee in front of male witnesses, female witnesses. Then you have to tell the woman that they're divorced. Isn't that fucked up? She tromping along thinking she's already happily married. And yeah. A few years after that, she received a letter from a woman, I think it was in Finland, but it might have been Sweden, saying this woman saying that she was in love with Mahmoud and wanted confirmation that he was not married. And Ayaan happily said, no, we weren't married, nothing ever happened. And basically just closed that chapter on her life. She's like, it was a blip. It's a one-night stand I can never really discuss because, I don't want to die. But nah, nothing happened. He says, we're not married. We're not married. Totally believe him, 100%. And there was no hard feelings. Like, she's not mad at him about this. Now, after her one night with her husband, things in Mogadishu were spiraling. Now, this is 91, 92. So Black Hawk Down is how most Americans think of Mogadishu, Somalia. That happened in 1993. So not quite there yet, but it was spiraling. It was getting bad. And the clans were warring, and she was not of the clan that was supporting Syed Barre. He was still nominally in power. So her and Hawea and a lot of their family went back to Kenya. While she was in Kenya, she helped other refugees, family, mostly that large clan system, cross over into Kenya. She used her Swahili and her ability to speak with the local guards to help get them into Kenya. Now, while she was there, Ayaan was reunited with her father just in time for him to announce that he had made a match for her with another cousin, Osman Musa, relative in Canada. Now, cousin, incidentally, this Mahmoud was her first cousin. All right, so she comments on that. It says, I know now, obviously, if we had children, it would have been a disaster genetically speaking. Everything else is extended cousins. It might be third or fourth cousins. So I don't know that Osman was her first cousin. I don't think she mentions it, so I'm assuming he's not. But he was a cousin, extended cousin of the family living in Canada. And Ayaan said many times in here she didn't want to marry. This is not what I want. I have no interest in this. I don't want to marry Osman. And her father was like, you don't actually have to even be there. I'll just sign the paperwork for you, which is true. In Islamic marriages, the woman's consent and presence are not in fact needed. It's basically to just barter them away. Yeah, beautiful, right? So her wishes were completely ignored. She found herself married to Osman Musa and shipped to Germany to wait with his family in Germany while he arranged passage for her to Canada. And in Germany, she saw her chance and she took it. She talked to another cousin or a nephew or the son of the host family, something, and told the family that she was going to go visit a friend in Holland. And once she was in Holland, she went straight to a refugee camp and took the name Ayaan Hirsi Ali to dodge her family. And here's basically where part 2 starts. And she's very honest in admitting that she lied to get refugee status in Holland. Now, I don't know if running away from a forced marriage and possible honor killing when her lack of virginity was discovered would have gotten her refugee status. Probably not, because she does tell that to the very first people she meets at the refugee office, that she had been forced into a marriage. And they basically said, so is basically everybody, that's not going to be good enough. And so she thought about it. And when she had her first official meeting with the government lawyer who was to help her navigate the process, she gave them a detailed account of what it was like being a refugee from Mogadishu, an account that she was able to accurately provide, even though it was entirely fictional, because she'd helped all those other refugees cross into Kenya. So she changed her name from Ayaan Hirsi Megan to Ayaan Hirsi Ali, and changed her birth date to November 13th, 1967. So she made herself 2 years older. Again, did all this to throw off her family. And it worked for a while. All right. For a while, she was safe. And while they had not yet found her, she was actually granted official refugee status, which gave her the right to move out of the refugee camps and into Holland proper if she wanted to, which she very much did. She wanted to take advantage of the opportunity she saw before her. She was taking that time to become fluent in English and to see what options might be open to her. But eventually, the family found her. And it was bound to happen. They're looking, right? They're not just going to say, oh, runaway bride, lost another one. They're going to look until they find her and see if they can talk her back into the fold. And when the family found her, they basically put her on trial. I mean, her family, not the Dutch. Her Dutch trial is going to come much later at the end of the book. It's not a trial so much it's just it's not, the window's open, a bird just flew by, sorry. Her family did find her in the refugee camp, and they basically held a quorum of the elders, all right? They pulled together as many of the clan as they could, and the head of the family representative sat as the judge, basically. Now, she wisely held all the meetings in the refugee camp. She refused to go to a neutral third location. She's like, nope, the refugee camp is neutral enough for me, thank you. And this prevented them from dragging her kicking and screaming through the streets of Holland. And after everything was laid out, they gave Ayaan a chance to respond. And they're like, but if you say yes, you can't run away again. You got to come with us. And they were going to basically give her a day to think about it. She's like, I don't need a day. My answer is no. It's the will of the soul, I think she said. It was very well the way she said it, you know, and she says it sounds pretentious in retrospect, but honestly, I gotta wonder if that exact phrasing isn't what made them give up, because they walked out and she stayed in Holland. Yeah, she said, I don't want to be married to him. It's the will of the soul. He hasn't beaten me. He hasn't done anything wrong. I don't want to be married to him. And her refugee status had been granted, so they took that no and left. And she said about becoming fluent in Dutch, all right, which allowed her to work as a translator. As someone fluent in multiple languages spoken by refugees, she made very good money as a translator. And that was hard work. I know people think that, oh, you're just going to sit there and translate from like Spanish to English in a court, right? Sort of. She's having to translate for women who have been brutalized and beaten by their spouses, who have been raped, who have contracted HIV and having to tell them that. Right? She's having to act as translator in schools, and usually she's supposed to just basically be like Google Translate, just sit there and what was said, here's how it is in that language, right? But she found herself having to occasionally ask if she could break that robotic mean and translate culturally to explain to the refugees why allowing their son to just, you know, beat the shit out of people was going to be bad for everybody. And this allowed her to work her way through college. From the person who was, you know, so stupid that her mother and grandmother beat her weekly, she earned a degree in political science. Not an easy topic when Dutch isn't your mother tongue, but she learned it well enough that she was able to go to school in Leiden. She went to the premier school in Holland and earned her degree in political science, shrugging off that condemnation of stupidity that she had lived under her whole life. She initially found work in the Labour Party think tank. That lasted until she began publishing articles and making public appearances in regards to her opinions on Islam. Now, just to be clear, the Labour Party did not expel her. It's not that like they were like, oh, your opinions don't agree with ours, you're out. Not at all. Everything was very professional, very kind. She made friends, and they absolutely supported her right to free speech. In fact, so much so that she started to feel guilty about some of her early writings that criticized members of the Labour Party because they were so open about it, which I just don't see happening here in America, to be honest. What happened is, while her ideas were coalescing into written form and she was making more of a presence for herself, she found that her true political home was with the Liberal Party, which is not to be confused with the weirdness that is the current, you know, Democratic Party here in the United States. Right? Don't confuse the party name with the party politic, if you will. Think more classically liberal, like Thomas Jefferson. And her mission was to help Muslim women. This was her driving force. This is where she found why she found her political home in the Liberal Party. While standing for election, she explains a bit about the electoral process in Holland, which was really interesting and not at all like the electoral process here in the United States. But this is when she really ran afoul of the Islamists. And some credible threats started to come in. I think the sun's coming up, I'm going to have to close my curtains here. Credible death threats. She would ultimately win her seat and then end up semi-nomadic for more than a year while security tried to locate her a safe place to live where she would still be able to do her job. So she was basically had a 24/7 security detail for like 3 years or something like that. And right before she ran, she came to embrace atheism. Fair, man. She's seen some shit. She's done some things. And she knows that Islam is not the way in the light, right? But you don't get to just embrace atheism after being a Muslim. They just really don't like apostates. They don't like kafir. They don't like infidels. Hence the name of her book, which I absolutely love. Atheism angered the Muslim population. Like, her dad didn't speak to her for several years. Eventually they would make up, although it was never going to be the close bond they'd had before. She actually had been her father's favorite for a long time. She loudly decried the hypocrisy and disgrace of Islam. It's from her that the West is aware of a lot of what gets hidden and swept under the rug with Islam. It's the religion of peace. And she's like, no. The Prophet married a 6-year-old and consummated it when the child was 9. Yeah, she confirms that this is literally in the Quran and the Hadith. This is what's taught. So Islam has no perspective on criticism. Now, one might think that with the inclusion of credible death threats that horribly disrupted her life and cost her friendships, puppies are sleeping, she would make deporting as many Muslims as possible her platform. But she's a big picture thinker. Deporting everyone does nothing to change minds. She wanted to shut down the religious schools, where the minds are made. It was a hard pass in Holland, and obviously that never went anywhere. More than Muslims wanted to send their kids to religious schools. All right, they have a lot of Christian schools, a lot of Jewish schools. Freedom of religion is very big in Holland. It's the birthplace of the Enlightenment. And so no, it was a hard pass, but that was her goal, was to shut down at least the Muslim schools, if nothing else, because of how they teach and what they teach and how insular Muslim communities are. Now, additionally, she knew that if the men were sent back, the women would also go. And then they are unquestionably worse off than they would be in Europe, right? At least if they're in Europe, there's a chance they can make their own way. There's a chance they can break out of that mindset. But if they're thrown back to Kenya, to Somalia, to Saudi Arabia, to Bosnia, where they're in these insulated enclaves with nothing around them, physically showing them a different way of life, they got no chance. So she wanted to free the Muslim women, I mean, much like she did, right? She knew there was a better way because of the books she'd read, right? She read all those Harlequin romances. She read all the literature. She read the Jane Austen. When she arrived in Holland, she was given advice by the refugee center and other refugees to just sit back and collect the welfare checks. But she wanted more than that. She wanted to be a master of her own fate. And she took those opportunities. When they were presented to her, she did exactly that. She worked temp jobs until she got good enough at Dutch to become a translator, which basically tripled her salary overnight. She went from making like 16 guilders. This was before the euro. I think she said it was guilders. 16 guilders an hour to 45 guilders an hour. Literally tripled her salary overnight. She wanted to do that. She wanted to be in charge of her own life and knew that if she's dependent on the state to take care of her and maintain her, then she's never going to be in charge of her own life. And so she did all that. She learned Dutch. She went to college. She got a degree. She became a politician. After she naturalized, obviously, they don't let they don't let refugees serve in Parliament in Holland, but she had become a Dutch citizen. She waited the mandatory 5 years as a refugee and then took her citizenship oath, got her Dutch passport. She wanted these things for herself. And then in August 2004, she was invited to interview on a local show. It's in there. I don't remember the name of it. And the show would usually include video clips from past Dutch television, so everybody could kind of reminisce over the cultural impacts. And this is what made me who I am, right? Well, since she wasn't born in Holland and had only been a citizen for like 6 years at this point, she asked if she could bring in a film project she'd been thinking of making with local director Theo van Gogh. And they said, yeah, of course, that'd be great. We need to know what impacts you. This is our shtick on our show. Absolutely. So submission part 1 was quickly directed and produced. And the death threats began immediately. And she tried to get a protective detail for Theo. But Parliament's like, well, I mean, he waved it off. He didn't think anything would come of it. He's like, people have been threatening me for years and nothing's going to happen here. It's fine. And Parliament, it can't force protection on somebody. And on November 2nd, 2004, he was butchered by Islamist extremists. He was shot and stabbed. They left a note pinned to his chest or something. And Ayaan went into witness protection for 18 months, which also included a stay in Andover, Massachusetts. They actually ended up hopping the ocean with her to keep her safe at one point. She had just barely been allowed to return to work when she was basically forced to resign as her Dutch citizenship was put in jeopardy based on the false statements of her initial petition for refugee status. But by the time that happened, she was okay with it because she was done with politics. She had already become worn out from it. Not the protective detail didn't help. I'm sure if she'd had the freedom to come and go, it might have had. She might have lasted a little longer in politics, but she was done with it. She was tired of it, and she had a job offer for an American think tank, the American Enterprise Institute. So basically, she went along with whatever the Dutch came up with to settle her citizenship question quickly and efficiently that would not have her sent back to Somalia prior to moving to America and publishing this memoir. Like, some of the stuff was happening while she was writing the final pages of this book. What struck me is the epilogue, where she considers herself lucky, saying, quote, "How many girls born in Digfir Hospital in Mogadishu in November of 1969 are even alive today? And how many have a real voice?" End quote. Which is true. But equally true is the maxim that in the end, you make your own luck. Okay? I mean, most people who sit back and bitch about, oh, this person, that person is so lucky, they don't see the work that goes into that. They don't see the person reaching out and grabbing life and saying, this is what I want for myself, and then doing everything they can to make that happen. She saw her chance and she took it. All right? She knew, God, if she'd actually gone to Canada, she'd have been stuck there. All right? There'd have been no escape, because Canada and America are a hell of a lot bigger geographically than Germany and Holland. She took her chance. She set her heart on true north and then never deviated from that course. I have no doubt she still has a death sentence from Islam. Again, they have just no sense of humor, these religious extremists, right? She really is an amazing author. And there's, obviously, again, this is just a very quick outline. There's so much more in here to really understand how terrifying aspects of her life must have been. She's an amazing author. And as depressing and hopeless as part 1 was, part 2 was uplifting and inspiring. And it shows the full gamut of a human experience, from torture to near death to war to survival to escape, hope, triumph. And it reads like a novel with a hero's journey. And it puts a very different perspective on life. And for someone who was born in the absolute safety of America, in the mid-70s, my God. Yeah, okay, technically we are still in the Cold War at that point, but I think by that point we all knew that nothing was ever going to happen. Rather, if it happened, there's nothing to be done about it, so why fucking worry? It tells a story of perseverance and survival that I'm never going to realize in my own life. Unless the apocalypse they've been promising me actually happens, but realistically, born safe and sound, lived my whole life under an umbrella of safety. Something that Gen Z might consider for perspective. I'm just saying. Choosing to identify as impossible pronouns is in no way comparative to fleeing a forced marriage under fear of death because you're not a virgin. So yeah, I like this book. I am fully impressed by the sheer determination of Ayaan Hirsi Ali, and I hope someday to hear her speak in person. I think she's a remarkable woman. And that's it for this week. And if you liked what you saw, don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you guys next Sunday. Bye.